Hello and welcome to the first video of 2016, where today I'm talking about games from 2015, so really moving on with that New Year thing. And I realised that I don't necessarily buy and play through a lot of games as they come out, which is why you'll notice the title says, Games I Beat. What this means is that any game I've beaten, regardless of console or when it was released, is a potential candidate. Well, that's not true actually. It has to be the first time I beat it, so that any old favourites I've replayed don't just dominate the list. And making this list will be very easy, as I've kept track of my game buying and finishing with a spreadsheet. Yeah, I'm that sad and nerdy. Oh, and one final introductory point. That game playing in the background? That's a total red herring and didn't make the top 10. So, without further ado, let's rock. Number 10. Rayman Legends. I got New Super Mario Bros. U with my Wii U, and frankly barely played it. It was just another decent 2D Mario platformer, and given I've been playing games since some of my earliest gaming memories, at the age of 3, 19 years later, that's not exactly setting my world on fire. Which brings me to the two Rayman reboot games, which have not been afraid to throw away old unnecessary systems like lives, and instead focus on the basics to create fast, fluid gameplay, while still being willing to actually mix things up with this to add variety to the game. And nothing illustrates this better than Legends' music stages, which takes the rhythmic style of platformers to a natural next step by tying all the acts in the stage to a musical number playing in the background, which created some of the most fun platformer levels I've played in a long time. Unlike Mario, this is a game I sure played a lot of myself, as well as making friends play it when they came round. And even the split-screen multiplayer Kung Fu game is pretty fun in short bursts. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, the 2D artwork done for this game looks great. Number 9. Theatre-driven Final Fantasy Curtain Call. I like music games. I like Final Fantasy. Combine the two into a game, and I like the game. Enough said. Okay, but seriously, the game has over 200 songs, which is a phenomenal amount for a music game. It also provides more control options for players in the first game, as well as the ability to switch and mix the different control styles, even within a single song. The game also provides a nice RPG layer on top of its very solid rhythm gameplay, which while not game changing, does add an enjoyable extra element to the game in quest mode, with maps to get through and different playable characters to level up and build teams with, which adds special skills and powers to help get more items and bonuses from a stage. And of course, one big element I haven't mentioned is the music. And given I consider the Final Fantasy series to be the best game series for music, it stands to reason that I consider a giant collection of Final Fantasy tracks as a great soundtrack. And I should mention, if you are interested in the game, this sequel makes its predecessor obsolete as it contains all the tracks from that game. Number 8. Tales from the Borderlands. I think it's fair to say Telltale have developed a certain reputation for making a certain type of game after The Walking Dead blew up, with its narrative-driven style with some origins in the old point-and-click games. And of these, I played 2 of them, The Wolf Among Us and now Tales from the Borderlands. And I've got to say, Borderlands is my favourite. I think the reason that Telltale have such a good reputation is entirely based on their fantastic writing team. They seem to be able to faithfully adapt any franchise while still producing great stories within whatever limitations these provide, and Borderlands is of course no exception. As opposed to the tone of the other recent games they've done, Borderlands is much more light-hearted and doesn't take itself so seriously, and the writers have shown they are completely comfortable with this style as well, though their games prior to Walking Dead probably already showed this. And what I really like is that the fact that the game is less serious overall makes the heavier moments hit all that much harder, and I'm not ashamed to admit, there was a part where I could feel myself welling up a bit, so much so that I even chose a more sentimental dialogue option instead of just making a reference. It's the contrast and the fact that we've laughed with the characters rather than just constant seriousness and somberness that make these heavier moments so much more effective. It's the same kind of principle that make Futurama episodes like Jurassic Park so effective. And while with these Telltale games, the start and finish will generally play out the same, what makes this game in particular so interesting is that it seems like there's some parts that could play out very differently, encouraging replayability. And I think I may well do so this year. Number 7. The Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds. You know, it's funny, prior to actually getting the game, I was all prepared to write a what went wrong video about it, in regards to the item rental system in the game, expecting it to cause a big loss in the feeling of progress. But thankfully it turns out I was actually wrong about that. It allowed much more freedom for exploration and dungeon order, but the game kept enough things back that were obtained or unlocked separately from its system to maintain a feeling of progress. But what really makes the game is its clever puzzle design, such as how it utilises the new ability of turning into a painting and moving along walls. But what makes these puzzles so interesting is how it doesn't get bogged down with a load of tutorials or just hand-holding for the solutions. Instead, it has a much more natural learning process of showing rather than telling, which is greatly helped by how it gradually escalates the complexity of how you need to use your abilities, which gives a feeling of progress to how the player thinks the puzzle solutions through, as well as just the usual character becoming more powerful progression. Number 6. Etrian Odyssey 4 Legends of the Titan. Prior to Etrian Odyssey Untold the year before, I hadn't really delved much into the dungeon crawler subgenre of JRPGs, tending to prefer a more narrative driven experience with my RPGs. I actually already did a What Went Right video about this series, but to sum up what makes this game so great is that it challenges you with its battles and manages to brilliantly balance this challenge with a great feeling of progress. One of the big features of the series is that you draw your own maps on the touchscreen, and it's a feature that is so much more fun and enjoyable than it probably sounds. And it also really helps with that feeling of progress, as even if you get wiped out and get a game over, you can still keep your map data. So even in failure, you've still done something to make progress and help you out in your next go. Number 5. Splatoon. Splatoon kinda came out of nowhere, announced at E3 the year before as a new Wii U IP, and venturing into a genre Nintendo haven't really delved into much, a third-person multiplayer shooter. And, as its position here should dictate, they knocked it out of the park. I really liked the approach they took, moving away from your traditional deathmatch model, instead going for more of a focus on territory capture. Now I played a lot of Gears of War Online, in particular the Annex game mode, so clearly I like to focus on something other than just killing, and Splatoon very much captures that spirit and takes it even further. It's all based on using ink to cover as much territory as you can, and one of the key aspects is transforming into a squid and being able to move through your own ink colour, which can lead to some cool gameplay elements. It allows you to move much faster, allowing you to get back into the action quicker, and can lead to some neat emergent stuff, like painting ink on a wall to climb up behind the sniper and things like that. In fact, I decided to play the game for a couple of matches to help decide its position on this list, and I ended up playing for a few hours, and that's definitely a good sign for a game. Number 4. Shin Megami Tensei 4. This is a game where being able to see all the games I finished this year was very helpful, as I completely forgot that it had been this year I'd finished the game. The Shin Megami Tensei series is a JRPG series that sets itself apart from its contemporaries by being much darker in tone, and it handles the morality system far better than most games, as it's not all just black and white. I actually found myself far more siding with the demon chaos side rather than the lore side. Though of course the gameplay is very solid, one of the key elements is the demon recruitment and fusion systems, and it's very addictive to keep getting and fusing more and more powerful demons. I do feel that sometimes the recruitment is too random, but I was hooked regardless. The game can actually present a good challenge as well, with the battle system based around the press turn system, where hitting weaknesses gives you bonus turns, but on the other side, resistances and immunities lose you turns. So strategically using the right elements and types of attacks is very important, and if you don't, you will get beat, as the bosses are definitely not a pushover. What made me particularly like this game in the series is that while it's still challenging, it's very much designed around the player, with things like the ability to save anywhere and the ability to pay to come back from a game over outside of the battle you died in. This contributes a lot to not frustrating the player with lost time and progress, while still having some punishment for dying. Oh, and when I say pay, I don't mean like microtransactions with real money. It's kind of sad that I think that needs to be specified. Number 3. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Remember how at the start of this video I said it could be any game I finished this year regardless of console? Well, here's a game that's actually not on a current gen system to actually make it worth specifying with that statement. And what do you know, it's on my beloved GameCube, and wait a minute, I haven't actually talked about any GameCube games in my videos at all. Wow, that's surprising. But anyway, moving away from that random tangent, Path of Radiance is my favourite Fire Emblem game. And exploiting my beating it for the first time rule, because this is a game I have actually played before. Like a lot of JRPGs I played during my younger years, it was my sister's game, and while I played and enjoyed it, I never actually made it to the end. And like a lot of those games, it's become stupidly expensive to rebuy. But after getting my first job, I found a good bargain and treated myself to the game. But anyway, to talk about the actual game now. The Fire Emblem series is a great strategy RPG series, most well known for its permadeath system. But there are a couple of things to this game that make it stand out within the series. The first of which was the introduction of the Laguz enemies, which are half human, half animal transforming units, which have a distinct different playstyle to the regular human units, as well as being used as a way of the story dealing with racism. And partly helped by its new unit type, it does a great job of variety in the level layouts, preventing the game from becoming repetitive. The other key thing that makes the game stand out is the main character Ike, and unlike other games in the series, he's not royalty or nobility, and is instead just a member of his father's mercenary group. And while in many respects, he's your typical goody JRPG hero, the way he is around the class system is interesting. He gets annoyed with the pointless pomp and ceremony that comes with dealing with nobility, while at the same time, one of his main motivations is helping a princess. He tends to treat people equally, judging more on a person's character and actions rather than their prestige or class, and this is best reflected with one of the main villains, the Black Knight, who is defined entirely by her own power and actions, with very little learnt about who they are or their past in this game. Honestly, my biggest problem with the game is the price it goes for nowadays. I really hope Nintendo start releasing GameCube games on the Wii U Virtual Console, so more people get to play this game. Number 2. Disgaea 5. Disgaea 5 is another entry in a brilliant SRPG series that I love, so its appearance in this list is decidedly unsurprising, with solid and deep gameplay systems, including clever ideas like the geosymbols, which can provide effects to maps adding great variety to level layouts. It also has an enjoyable full RPG length campaign, as well as a massive amount of extra time if you want to get into the post game, and its excellent grinding. It also has a story that, much like what I said with Borderlands, is able to tell its serious parts better, via contrasting with the way the game's story doesn't normally take itself too serious, being willing to have fun with itself. And 5 brings some neat new additions, like the Overload and Revenge mode systems. But unfortunately, as the 6th entry in the series, no, that's not a mistake, I just can't justify giving it the number 1 spot for essentially iterative improvements. Number 1. Bayonetta 2. So my number 1 game is Bayonetta 2, a game I actually beat all the way back in January, so high standard was set very early in the year. I loved the first Bayonetta, but when I replayed the Wii U version, I did notice a few small blemishes on the otherwise great game. Then I played its sequel, and all those blemishes were fixed. It had great colour variety in its visuals, exploration felt better, the magic meter actually had a use for boss battles, the story was improved over the original, and I even preferred the character design for Bayonetta herself. The main fault I can think of for the game is that one character's voice really annoyed me. You could say I didn't love their performance, and when that's the only problem I can think of, it's definitely a sign of a great game. But other than that one character, the audio work is good. I really dig the soundtrack, and have regularly listened to Tomorrow Is Mine and the Moon River Climax mix outside the game because they are just great tracks. The first Bayonetta was already a brilliant action game, and this is a stronger sequel to that. It was the main reason I got a Wii U, and definitely justifies that purchase. Not only is it my top game of the year, but it even entered into my top 10 games of all time, but that's a video for another day. And it's definitely a title I want to replay, of course assuming my sister ever returns my copy she borrowed. And I'd like to give a couple of honourable mentions to games that, due to my own requirement of needing to beat the game, did not qualify for this list. The first of which is Xenoblade Chronicles X, a frankly humongous game that I only got on Christmas, and there was absolutely no chance I'd get through it in just a single week. The second game is The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, Second Chapter, which as the name implies is a sequel to Trails in the Sky, a brilliant JRPG that I loved, but annoyingly ended on a cliffhanger, And finally, several years later, its sequel has been translated, and due to taking a more casual pace of playing through the game, rather than rushing to get it done in 2015, I haven't managed to finish it. And of course, there's various other great games that didn't make the list. There were 50 candidates that qualified for the list, so naturally, there's plenty of stuff that, while great games, just didn't quite rise above the rest to make it into the top 10. Well, thanks for watching, and that spreadsheet comment earlier wasn't a joke. I genuinely have one for games, and it's a pretty nifty one. It's got formulas, filters, and even a pivot table. I guess you could say I excel at Excel. Yeah, that's right, I'm starting Yis's end jokes as I mean to go on, with terrible puns.